Rabbit tails, come and hear ya.
Hey Tim, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, hanging in there, you know. How you going?
Just hanging in, shipwrecked at Rainbow Bay. What can you do?
No waves today?
No, it's it's a bit of a northerly blowing today, and there's been little waves. It looks like it's going to improve over the next few days, but fortunately we're still allowed to go on the surf here, so hopefully everyone behaves and sits 1.5 meters apart.
Yeah, there's been a bit of discussion about that, which I thought we could chat about, like how we make sure that we can keep surfing. There's been a bit of commentary, not all crowding to one spot, not all flocking to the popular point breaks, spreading ourselves out, surfing in your own postcode.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think everyone hanging in their own village and own suburb is probably the answer, or just surfing your local for a while. Obviously, if we get a major swell, that'll be the big test. Is everyone going to behave themselves behind the rocket snapper? That's the big test.
Yeah.
God, it's all right when it's like, I think when it's 2 to 4 feet, I think it can all sprinkle out and spread out. But if we get one of those perfect 6-foot days, oh gosh, I'm a bit worried about that.
Yeah. I guess we want to try.
There's places I saw, California, the perfect lineup at Malibu, like just looked unbelievably awesome. Not one single person had a sup rider went out there, and the Coast Guard chased him down, the police chased him down. It was unbelievable scenes.
Yeah,
I think in Hawaii that they can surf.
Yep.
They're allowed to surf and probably just go home. And I think that's cool if we can do that here too. Just go down, have your surf, don't hang on the beach, don't hang around, just have your surf, go home.
Yeah, we probably want to try and avoid those scenes where there's like 300 or 400 people in the water and it blows up in the media and people start freaking out about it.
Oh, it'll blow up in the media for sure. We'll have East Rainbow and West Rainbow. It'll be like the Berlin Wall going up, and the worst of humanity coming out.
Yeah.
Localism to the max. Dobbing into the Stasi police in Germany in the 1960s. Really horrible. Yeah. Hopefully we can all coexist and make it all work together and just behave ourselves out there.
Yeah.
And that way we can keep surfing. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's in all our interests.
Yeah. Well, surfing's got to be, physically it's physical exercise, but from a mental health point of view, to be able to go in the ocean is very therapeutic, and it'll keep everyone sane, keep everyone relaxed and calm, and we're on all crafts, whether you're just going in for a swim, a body surf, a bodyboard, a surfboard, a sup, anything, just to be able to go in the ocean is, I think, it's very important at this time. We're an ocean-loving nation, and to be able to get out there, and I think they've even changed down in some parts of Sydney where they banned it, all the beaches were closed and that, but now they're allowing people to go into the ocean, have a swim, have a surf, put your towel on the beach, get your towel and go home.
Yeah.
And not loiter about.
Yeah.
So hopefully, they've had a rethink, and it's a more of a rational, common sense approach.
Yeah. And if we're playing the long game, if this is a few months, people are going to need their outlets to preserve sanity, aren't we?
Well, that's right. And the Prime Minister is saying, exercise is an important part of going out for a while. And, there's no better exercise than going for a paddle or a swim or, something in the ocean. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're coming into an incredible time of year. April, May, June are, fantastic months here. And it's our best surf season, really. And so it's a wonderful time. It's not cold, it's warm, offshore winds, beautiful, pristine conditions. So, the ocean is beckoning.
Yeah. And of course, this time of year, for a long time, yours and a lot of other surfers' thoughts would have turned to Bells Beach and Torquay traditionally. Pretty strange that, first time in 58 years or something, there'll be no Bells competition this Easter.
Yeah, I know. Well, Snapper was cancelled, and Bells Easter was just a couple of weeks after, so it was inevitable. And it's really sad. That that great pilgrimage from around the world now to go to Bells Beach. Yeah, at Easter is just something that is inbuilt into surfing. You know, it's part of our surfing heritage. So yeah, it's a bit sad for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And thought it might be fun to, you know, think back on some of your first trips to Bells and just what a kind of epic adventure it was. I think we've all got those really fond memories of, you know, pulling up and seeing that lineup for the first time and the mighty southern headland and the cliffs.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true, Tim. You know, we do all have all those memories of that first arrival at Bells, and of course back then it was always a road trip.
Yeah.
You know, we set off for my first trip to Bells in Easter 1971 with, you know, Joe Larkin was our sponsor. It was Joe Larkin who was driving in the Joe Larkin surf van. Terry Baker was you know, the top judge at the time. Good surfer in his own right, but he was going down to judge Bells. And it was Michael Peterson, Peter Townend, and myself, the original three Cooley kids, and it was an amazing trip. I mean, I even remember, you know, a lot of those road trips are remembered by the music, you know, you played, and you all got to pick a cassette tape. And I mean, we had, you know, like we had Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Van Morrison, the Beatles, the Doors, the Rolling Stones. I think there was Janis Joplin, Cream. That was my favourite, Cream.
Yeah.
And you know, the songs. I mean, and Santana. You know, and you just remember road trips. You just, you know, every time you hear those songs, you know, you hear Santana, and I always think of the road trip. You know.
Yeah, that's a great soundtrack.
Oh, that's a great lot of it. And we had I remember we had a Bill Cosby tape, some comedy, some humour. And, you know, they just got played over and over and over, and they just become, you know, I think it took us at least a week to get there.
Yeah,
you know,
it was an epic road trip from Coolangatta to Torquay.
Epic. I mean, you know, we've got you know, uncles in that down in Moruya. And, you know, Moruya is a beautiful little coastal town on the south coast of New South Wales. And we stopped down at the Moruya Breakwater, and we camped there overnight. And we got up in the morning, and you know, I was a few years younger than Michael Peterson and Peter Townend, so they had a big rivalry going. They were already, you know, Michael Peterson was the Queensland Open men's champion. PT got second. I was still in the juniors, so I was no threat. And in the morning we got up, and the Moruya Breakwater was unbelievable. There was this left-hander coming through. It was like the best waves you could ever imagine seeing, and not a single surfer out. And PT got his board out the board cover, and it was just, you know, the perfect board cover. He got out the board, the pink board, you know, his little white goatee. Everything was, you know, PT loves everything. He was a perfectionist, you know. Yeah. He's doing the wax job perfectly. MP came from around the back of the van, and he'd melted a tub of butter, and he just swooshed it over PT's board. And of course, they ended up, you know, having a bit of a knuckle right there, and then it all blew up, you know. And there was Terry Baker there, was trying to break him up. Joe was sitting in his car, and he was rolling up a roll your own cigarette, and he was just sitting there having a cigarette, watching it all, just watching it happen, saying nothing, just carrying on. And I went out and surfed Moruya Breakwater by myself. I had the first half hour by myself. It was a bit spooky, but the waves were so perfect. And finally, they went, "Hey, we're here to surf. Let's surf." And it was an amazing session. And you know, we stayed in Moruya for a few nights, and now down at the Monarch Hotel, they've done a reenactment of that trip in 1971 with a big mural. Yeah, a big mural on the side of the hotel with MP, PT, myself. It's classic. You know, they remembered us going there. I mean, we went. There was an open air theatre. We watched the movie Patton. You know, we ate at a restaurant. We stayed there a few days, and then we moved on down the coast. And I do remember getting to Melbourne and going, "Well, it feels like we'd been on the road for weeks."
Yeah, yeah.
And Joe said, "We're only an hour from Bells." And I went. It was just. I still remember how exciting it was that we were like in an hour's time we're going to be at Bells Beach. And you know, that first trip. I mean, it was a debut year for Simon Anderson, Mark Richards, Steve Cooney, Bruce Raymond, myself, and quite a few other juniors that all became quite prominent names in surfing.
Yeah.
all made our debut at Easter at Bells. And it wasn't the Bells Easter, it was the Australian titles.
Yeah, right.
It was actually won by Paul Nielsen, the Open men's, and Simon Essen won the juniors. But I remember on this classic day when it was offshore and just absolutely perfect. And all I had a short john, which was a spring suit with no arms.
Yeah.
So I had a short john, and I went out early in the morning, and it was absolutely freezing. And I remember I came in, and Paddy Conlon, who was going out with MP, she wrapped her arms around me just to warm me up. I remember how nice that was. But it was really, it was super fun. I mean, even though, I didn't have the equipment, didn't have the wetsuit. But this is around also the same time as we were going down there, the Tracks magazine came out with the inside pull-out poster of a sequence of MP from Morning of the Earth, including that famous cutback. And I remember I congratulated him on it, and he got all pissed off with me about something. I mean, it was like he was so gnarly, But I was still like the junior, because I'd known him. I'd been brought up in Coolangatta, and I remember going, oh wow! I mean, I was so honoured. Like MP had got the cover shot of Tracks magazine.
Yeah.
I was just gushing over it, and he just had a bit of a reaction to me, and I went, oh wow, okay.
Yeah. I remember you.
What was really cool, so Tom, what was really cool though was that this is how close I was with him back in those days. He gave me that board. The Morning of the Earth board he passed down to me.
Wow.
So I ended up in possession of that board, which is, when you think about it, that you got to like someone to do that to give them the board. So we got on pretty well in those days.
Yeah. I remember you describing, camping out in the tent, having MP on one side and PT on the other, kind of like the devil and the angel in each ear.
Well, it was so classic because PT was on one side, and PT was saying to me, Rab, you've got to get a scrapbook. You've got to document everything. You've got to cut out all the pictures, all the magazine articles, all the things in the newspaper, and put them in a scrapbook because you'll need that for your sponsorship and all that. And I'm listening to PT going, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, PT. And on the other side of me, there's MP going, psst. He used to call me Chine, as in China plate, mate.
Yeah.
He go, Chine, don't listen to that dickhead. Don't go, come this way, man. Come this way. Don't listen to him. So I was torn between the two because, I so looked up to MP because he was such a great surfer, and I so looked up to PT because we went to school together. He was great friends with my sister Wendy, and I respected PT because he was really very professional in his whole approach, and he was a visionary. And I was so torn. I definitely had a foot in both camps.
Yeah.
Just made it exciting campfire chats.
Yeah. And I guess that Bells Australian titles was your first chance to really assess your competition from around the country. Who kind of caught your attention at Bells?
Well, I already knew a few. I mean, because well, Simon was really good at Bells. He's always been good at Bells, and it was I looked at the older guys. Like, I mean, I already looked up to like Peter Drew and Paul Nielsen were fighting out the Australian titles, and they were from Queensland. And I already knew them. I knew they were great surfers. But, there was Richard Harvey, and, my favourite surfer was Ted Spencer, though.
Yeah.
I just loved, from the year before the Australian titles agreement, I just loved the surfing of Ted Spencer. And at Bells, it was extraordinary at Bells, and he was such a great surfer and just such a mystical guy. And, he had a real aura about him. And him and Charlie Bartlett, were, just sort of starting out on the whole Krishna journey. And it was just, to me, it was very spiritual, and he was a mystical kind of character, and his surfing was so unique. Everyone had such unique styles back then, and there was a lot of young guys I saw that that were just amazing surfers that probably never really went on to become pro surfers and that, but guys in the New South Wales team like what's his name, Holt, the guys that I can't even remember all their names, but you know, and then there was guys like Steve Butterworth and like guys from Newcastle that I'd never heard of before, and young Cole Smith, and then there was the Narrabeen crew, who I knew the Narrabeen crew because they'd come up to Greenmount for 2 summers in a row, and I knew all those guys, Tony Hardwick and Cole Smith and Dapper and all those guys, and they're all amazing surfers, you know, just awesome.
Yeah.
And then you had Ian Cairns and the crew from WA, you know, Barry Day was in my division. So it was great, you know. Yeah. And Morris Cole.
Yeah.
You know, so we're, you know, I think Morris made his debut then too. So we're all in the same boat. We're all young guys. Steve Cooney became a good friend of mine because I knew he was already kind of famous because he was in Morning of the Earth. And he was great. And Bruce Raymond and I were like best friends, you know. He was my best friend from Bondi.
Wow.
So it was a cool thing.
Yeah. And, you know, you were saying last time, you know, as a kid growing up in Coolangatta, you didn't know if there were Kira points all the way down the east coast of Australia. And I guess that trip was your first opportunity to kind of see what was out there and kind of what you had at home.
Well, that's true, Tim. I mean, you know, as I said, like Maruya was amazing on the way back from Sydney. We stopped at Whale Beach and that was amazing. Obviously, Bells and Winky Pop and surfing around that Victorian coast. We went down to Joanna. And Joanna was incredible. But then when we got home, I started to realise that, wow, we had some pretty special point breaks up here, you know, Snapper and Rainbow and Greenmount, Kira and D-Bar and Burley and Crumbit. I mean, you know, I realised that, yeah, you know, I mean, I lived right at Kira and I realised that, yeah, my home break was one of the, you know, there wasn't Kira's every 5 miles down the road. That really Kira was a unique wave, and I came to realise I lived in a pretty special place.
Yeah, and surfers would travel, you know, interstate to come surf those Gold Coast point breaks. A young Mark Richards, you were saying you'd see at an early age out at Rainbow.
Well, yeah, my friend, you know, Bruce Perrott and Peter Grant, I remember we'd come down to Greenmount and it was an amazing thing. I'd never really seen parents get behind their kids. Like we were really at the era where most of our parents weren't really into us surfing. Like surfing was a bum thing to do. A bunch of no-hopers, druggies, you know, just long-haired louts, dropouts, just total beach bums, you know. And but you know, Ray and Val Richards would watch Mark surf. He'd go and surf at Rainbow Bay, and we'd see him at Greenmount Point, Rainbow Bay, and this is when he was about 10 or 11. Probably about 11 years of age at the latest. This is when we first saw him, probably about 10. He had bright surfboard, which was, you know, none of us had bright surfboards. He had these bright iridescent pink midget Farrelly surf trunks, which really stand out. And it was back when before he became the classic Emma Wounded Seagull style, when he was really young, before he learned to carve, he sort of surfed with knock knees and he kind of waved his arms a lot. And with this bright coloured board, we used to kind of laugh at him,
yeah,
you know, at this kid. And there's his parents on the beach, you know, kind of remonstrating to him. And I was going, wow, this is amazing. Like, you know, he's sort of getting coached and all. He's got this awkward style and nothing like this Queensland style. And it was weird because we'd see him for a few summers and a few holidays. And then a few years later, when the first round of twin fins happened, I went up the top of Dranbar Hill one day and I looked down and off the wall Devo was going off and I saw this guy do this amazing, just ripping roundhouse cutback. And I went, well, that could only be MP. But I said, it didn't look like MP. And I went, because I used to call him the kid. And I went down there and I said, who's in my turf, you know? And I got down the bottom there and I looked out there and it was that kid, Mark Richards. And wow. he'd become a really good surfer. But that was cool. I mean, and then the Narrabeen crew would come up in like 1969 and 70. They'd spend the whole summer here. And they lived in a place called Victory Flats, right in the middle of Coolangatta, above Sid Aspinall's surf shop. And my sister and her boyfriend lived in the same flat. So we were all in there together. And that was an amazing time. You know, they were great surfers. You know, I mean, you know, Grant Oliver, Steve Cooney, Mark Warren, Fatty Al Hunt. Back then, his name was Sea Cow. He had this long lick of blonde hair. His nickname was Sea Cow. Tony Hardwick, Wicker.
Yeah.
A really great surfer. And the King, Cole Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you can see why Tom Carroll absolutely, Cole Smith was Tom Carroll's man, and I know why. I mean, MP and I used to basically get out of the water and watch him at Greenmount Point. He was absolutely phenomenal. He would come square off the water and go beyond 12 o'clock. And he had a sort of a knock knee style too, but on his backhand, he could whip the board around. He'd whip it around and drive down the face. And then he'd do this like 7-8 times. It was just so progressive, so far ahead of his time in surfing. And he had this amazing sense of balance. Incredible surfing. I mean, to this day, I mean, apart from Wayne Lynch, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Yeah. And I think the last time I told you that when we first saw Wayne Lynch, that the perfect figure eight surfing, that I just went, there could not be someone better than him surfing. He was that good. Yeah. But Cole Smith was more radical. And he just had the best backhand, even though he came from North Narrabeen, which was a left. His backhand was just out of this world. So that was exciting. Those guys, hanging out with those guys every summer. I learned so much off them. They kind of took me under their wing a bit. Wicker, I was a lot younger than that. They were sort of going, they were up here to party. I mean, they'd surf in the day, they'd go to the patch at night and that. And I remember in the morning, we'd all go over an early surf at D-Bar, and Wicker would always have a can of Coke. Yeah. And he'd go, this is it. This is the hangover cure, Coca-Cola, And I go, oh, okay. And I remember, in the Cura Pro-Am in 1970, I made the final. MP won it. Robbie Dean got second. I got third. And all the Narrabeen guys, NMO, and all the guys, they'd all come up for it, and we beat them at off the wall Duran Bar. And that was the first time that I kind of felt like I could surf at that level with those guys. And MP won a stereo set, and we went over to his place and we listened to Cat Stevens. I still remember he got a brand new stereo with the speakers. We set it up, we sat back, and we listened to Cat Stevens, Tea for the Tillerman. Wow. And we just played it over and over all afternoon, just sitting there, not a word spoken, no conversation at all, and just happily listening to Tea for the Tillerman in silence. Yeah.
That music just takes you back to an era, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. And that was just around here in Eden Avenue and Rainbow Bay, it was just really classic eras for the town, Yeah. And then that all led up to the 1970 Australian titles at Greenmount. And that's where, it was kind of like the end of an era in a way. Like it was the end of the 60s, and it was the end of the era. It was the last time Nat, Midget, Ted Spencer, all those guys, Druin, all of them, ever competed. They were trying to get into the world titles, to make the Australian team. And Terry Fitzgerald had moved up here, and he qualified through the Queensland team. And of course, he had the blonde afro, and he was doing these 360 spinners, and it was so cool. He had him down pat. But he was also carving, and he served Kira incredibly well. That beautiful style he had, and he was amazing out of Kira. Not probably the deepest tube rider, but he was the speed. He just had the king of speed, and he was riding a twin fin. Twin fins are a little bit difficult at Kira, I think. If you got a little bit too high, they spun out. But Terry Fitzgerald was such a great surfer. I used to love watching him. But that was the era. Like Druin was just walking around like Marlon Brando. He had a guy carrying his surfboard. He had this incredible, always had a hat and just looking amazing. And he was just untouchable. He had this aura where no one was going to beat him. And no one did beat him. It was held over 2 or 3 rounds at Greenmount Point. He just dominated. And this is an era where like Ted Spencer was amazing. Keith Paul, like Batty, Trelaw, Ian Goodacre, he was Goody and Batty. It was Frank Latta, Steve Cornish, and then Nat and Midget. They're all here, all of them. And I'll never forget this one of the semi-final when Nat did this big carving turn. He had these red shorts and he was just unbelievable, like a Greek god, and did this big carving turn and he hit a rock. and snapped his fin out. And seriously, he roared. He just roared. And I just went, it was like so loud and so fierce and so primeval. And Stan Cooper, and he was swearing. I mean, honestly, he made John McEnroe look like a choir boy. Stan Cooper was this, sort of elderly Victorian guy, administrator. He was like the father of Australian surfing, really, as far as structured surfing. And I remember him walking down the stairs at Greenmere, and he went up to Nat Young, and basically, he was about half the size of him. He had the shorts on with the shirt tucked in and the belt, the long Bermuda socks, and hush puppies. And he basically got Nat by the ear and walked him up the stairs and threatened him, if you get one more outburst, then you're not going to the world titles. And I mean, I remember I followed the whole scene, and it was unbelievable. And Nat, this guy actually put Nat in his place, and sort of, But, Nat was a bit frustrated because the waves were only like probably about 2 to 3 feet, and, wasn't quite in his element. Yeah. But he was just so awesome. And Wayne Lynch won his 4th Australian junior title in a row. He was just outrageously good. And, he had the long hair. He looked like Jesus, and, when he walked around, you felt like putting palm fronds down in front of him, as he walked around. And he was like the Messiah, Yeah. Everyone had their own style, and, these are the guys that influenced me so much.
Yeah.
About
and
having
obviously,
your own character, your own style.
There's a lot going on in surfboards at the time. Obviously, that transition era, shortboard revolution's been well documented. But you've gone from, fighting over the number 19 higher board with MP. Within a few short years, riding 5 foot something surfboards and everything in between. Must have been an amazing era for surfboard design.
Yeah, it really was, Tim. I mean, the boards, like, it's true. Like, it was only probably, seriously, it all happened in such a short time. It was only a year before where I was working for Johnny Charlton Kira. He had the higher boards, and these are all clunkers from the 1950s. And, for some reason, MP and I both thought that the number 19 high board was the one we had to have. And when people would fall off it, we'd race down, and the first guy who got it would take it out. Michael Peterson, Dave McDonald, there was me, and we'd ride other people's surfboards when they fell off, in the guise of protecting them from going on the rocks. And we'd go and catch a few waves on them, and then the guy would come in and we'd hand them back. And it was all kind of sweet. I remember Hacker Allen was my favourite surfer from Kira, and I remember one time he borrowed Macca's board. Dave McDonald had this beautiful Joe Larkin surfboard. And Hacker Allen borrowed it, and he was just carving this little board up. He was a longboard surfer, and he carved this little longboard up, and he's actually he finished the ride, and he was actually hanging his knee over the front of the board. It was just such a show. And then he just got off the board and stepped off onto the sand and walked off and let the board. It was heading towards the rocks, and Macca had to run down and basically dive and save his own surfboard from going on the rocks, because there was a bit of erosion and the waves were breaking right onto the rocks at Kira. But what happened then was that we used to get a rock break in the middle of summer. So you had the outside bank at Kira, the normal Kira barrel bank. But in the summer, we'd have a rock break, breaking basically from the weather shed down to the surf club along these rocks. And it's a gorgeous wave when it happens. It's really beautiful. It's pretty rare now, but from time to time it comes back. And this one holidays, I had a job as a baker boy, and I'd start work at 2 o'clock in the morning and finish at 8. And I knew on this one day, MP had made me this board. It was the second board he made me. The first board was the purple people eater that Tommy Peterson had glassed 5 cockroaches into the board just for good measure. And that board didn't work so well, but the second board MP made me on a cut down, now he was starting to become like, he was putting a bit of tail rocker in it, down rails, the plan shape was a bit more thought out, and he had a rake fin happening, and he made me this board. He drew this bat on this board, this really weird looking bat, and he called it the Demon. And he gave it to me, and this Saturday I knew I had this brand new board. I knew the rock break was going to be unbelievable. And I knew when I finished work, it was going to be coming in high tide and everything was lined up to be perfect. I got down there and it was a full scene at Kirra. Like everyone's down there on their 8.6s. They're walking the board. They're doing the soul arches. They're walking the board, the nose rides. They're in the car park. They're sitting on the bonnets of cars. They're in front of the surf club. Guys are walking around. They've got the paisley shirts on, the colourful boards, the new boardies. Some guys weren't even good surfers, but they called them side merchants. They'd walk along with the as though they were the best surfers in town, and they could hardly surf. But it was all about probably, getting the girls,
Yeah.
And I walked down with this 5'9" or 5'10" board. It was 20.5 inches wide, and the guys were actually laughing at me. And they're going, "Oh, Rab's got a Coolite board. Oh, Rab's got a surfer plane with a fin on it. That's a knee board. That's not a surfboard." Anyway, I went out on this rock break, and my very first wave, I took off, and this board had speed. And I sped, and I got in front of the break, and I got out on the open face, and I ripped into a cutback, and it was just this perfect roundhouse cutback, came around, bounced off the water, came down off the water, went up and hit the lip. And right there, it had changed everything.
Mm.
Like when I came in, people couldn't believe it.
Mm.
Like this board changed the way surfing was. And I'm not saying I changed the way surfing was, but I'm just saying this is the moment that, for me, I saw the change. I came in and people were not laughing at me anymore. And basically, between that weekend and the next weekend, it was all over. We had taken over. Like the shortboard guys had taken over surfing. It happened that quick.
Wow.
And guys started disappearing off if you didn't adjust. See, someone like Wayne Dean just adjusted immediately, but a lot of guys didn't adjust. And it's just the shortboard revolution completely happened. In fact, the longboards didn't come back for 30 years.
Yeah.
Until the renaissance of the longboard. And they completely disappeared. They went underneath people's houses.
Mm.
And it's true. It's exactly how it happened. I mean, it's nearly unbelievable to think it. It's like day and night. It's like the meteor hitting and the dinosaurs becoming extinct.
Mm.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. And can you remember when you first got any kind of inkling that anyone could make a living from surfing? What were the kind of early signs that professionalism might be kind of coming along?
There was one really big one. It was another one of those moments that I was at Miami High School in 1971, and the Honnessy surfboard factory was right across from the Miami High School, and the word came in that Paul Nielsen was getting paid a $20 a week retainer just to surf.
Wow.
And I thought, it was like the Blues Brothers, it was one of the first signs from God that you could get paid to surf. $20 a week. That was a big moment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But you could just about live on $20 a week back then, couldn't you?
For a whole summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a whole summer, you could live on $20 for a whole summer.
Yeah.
If you could, still scrounge around and and have some money left over for pinball still.
Yeah.
$20 was a lot of money.
Yeah. And how early did, your own vision of how, pro surfing might evolve start to materialize in your adolescent mind?
Well, when my mum, we lived in so many suburbs. We lived in Tweed Heads, we lived in Rainbow Bay, we lived at Kirra, we lived at North Kirra, we lived at Balinga. Then we moved to Broadbeach. And when we lived at Broadbeach, I used to walk to school, to Miami High School. It's about 4 kilometres.
Yeah.
I walked every morning and every afternoon back and forward. And I had this daydream. I didn't want to catch the bus because this daydream I had was so strong. And I had this whole vision and this daydream about a thing called professional surfing, about going around the world to the best surf breaks, to these Grand Prix surf events in places that I only could imagine existed. I used to have to walk along this one fence, and the fence had a gap in it, and I'd get to a certain point of the gap, and this represented part of the tour. I had to jump over this gap and land like a gymnast, and if I fell off, then I lost. Then I have to keep walking along, and that became the next part of the world tour. Until if I made it to the end, I was world champion. I mean, it was a really amazing vision I had, and I had it every day for 2 years. And it involved ratings and world rankings, and it was amazing. I mean, I always maintain to this day, the only thing about that daydream that I don't recall is that I just don't recall Mark Richards featuring so prominently in it. It was my dream.
Yeah. And MR crashed it.
Yeah, MR crashed into my dream. I didn't see it coming, right? I should have, though. I really should have. That twin fin, that twin fin, that day D-bar, I should have seen that coming.
Yeah. And so by the second time you went to Bell's, 72, that was with your old mate Andy Mack, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Andy Mack, PT again.
Yeah.
And a dear friend of ours, Bobby Knight, who's only just recently passed away. And that was an amazing trip because Andrew had just got a new car, a brand new car. And we all jumped in his brand new car. And only when we left did he tell us that he'd never driven a manual. He'd only driven automatics. And so he didn't actually know how to drive. We were going up first of all at Byron, towards the Burrenbar Range, and we'd overtaken the car and he'd lost power and he couldn't get it back into second gear. And there was a semi-trailer coming down the hill, roaring down the hill at us. And I thought we were all going to die for sure. And somehow he just slipped in and an incredible near miss. Then we surfed our way down the coast, and we surfed in Ngari, and then we got to Sydney. And of course, on the open road, he was going okay. But once we got to Sydney and all those red lights, he basically kangaroo hopped from one side of Sydney to the other because he couldn't, he the clutch and the gear, he didn't have it down. So we kangaroo hopped the car. And we stayed in Sydney. We went to, he was quite a culturally, in tune quite culturally, Andrew. And we went to art shows and went to movies. That was such a cool trip, When we stayed down there, we'd go a month early and we stayed down there and, again, Ted Spencer and Charlie, now Charles Bartlett was called Charles of the Sea. We got this one day, like this 10-foot day at Bell's before the contest, and it was so cool. It was just magical. It was great. So the Narrabeen guys came down early too, and we're all surfing together. Pretty uncrowded, Wayne Lynch and Morris Cole were out there, Simon Anderson, Ted Spencer, Charlie Bartlett, PT, myself, and it was just cool. It was something else. And Andrew McKinnon was a great surfer too. Yeah. Really great surfer. So that was just a fun trip. The road trips and staying at Torquay for a month at a time, like it's it's a sort of town where you can really become engrossed in the town. Like it grows on you, and you become, after you've been there 4 or 5 weeks, you feel like a local. Yeah. And then the day trips down to Joanna, just magical stuff. Just really, really cool. Rip Curl just had this tiny little shed around on Boston Road. This tiny little shed. Pat Morgan surfboards was bigger than Rip Curl. Yeah. And Sparrow was there and making these, the first of the wetsuits, and it was amazing. It was great.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. You would have been seeing the beginnings of the surf industry down there by 72.
Oh, yeah. Well, by 71 and 72, it was just starting to take form. Rip Curl were becoming more established. 72, I'd say they were a bit more established. 71, I think 73 they were sponsoring Bell's. So, and Claw was, an amazing guy, because Claw had come to the 72 world titles, Claw and Rod Brooks. You know, Rod Brooks was another guy, Victorian guy, who was incredible. You know, I mean, he was like the Open champion, like, I don't know, 10 years in a row. You know, great surfer at Bells. And so was John Law, you know.
Yeah.
There was some really good surfers, really great surfers from Bells. In Claw and Brian Singer were just, you know, classic guys. You know, Brian Singer was just, he was just a party animal, and, you know, just a great guy. And Claw was, you know, always like the mad scientist, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and he was always just, he always kept his, you know, his froth, you know, to this day. I mean, he's unchanged.
Yeah.
He still loves every bit of it.
Yeah.
You know? And it was amazing, you know, obviously in the early days of Quicksilver, you know. Quicksilver was just starting to emerge as a brand, you know.
Yeah. And they were starting to, you know, give product to the best surfers of the day. So having a Rip Curl wetsuit was a big deal back then.
Oh, they were. I mean, you know, and there was the eating contest, and there was expression sessions where you get $5 to go on the expression session. I mean, it was like getting handed. That was my first thing I ever received.
Yeah.
The first money I ever received, I walked up the hill at the stairs at Bells, and Jack McCoy was standing on the top of the stairs handing out $5 notes. And I got one.
Wow.
And it was like, I went, wow, I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
I'm getting paid to surf here.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been a big deal as a young bloke.
$5.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. Symbolic. I should have framed that $5, but I needed it, you know. I needed it to get home to Queensland.
Tell us about the eating contests. Was it the old Summerhouse Restaurant?
Yeah, the Summerhouse Restaurant that Jack McCoy had, and they were just great. See, it was always a big social scene, you know, and all the Americans and Hawaiians, we'd all socialise, you know, and just have super fun times together because, you know, I mean, Terry Lopez and Reno Abelier and you know, really great surfers were coming out to Bells, and obviously it was a few years later that the you know, the Coca-Cola Surfboard happened in 1974. But yeah, the eating contests were just, you know, they were cool as, you know, and it would be, you know, Morris Cole and Ian Cairns and Barry Dane, big guys, you know, and myself, you know. But I don't know, you can never really underestimate someone who's really is literally starving to death. I was pretty much unbeatable in those things, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't have to save up. I didn't have to like not eat for a while. This was like real food, and I was starving.
Yeah.
And I could pack it away.
And they probably wouldn't have picked you as the champion eater just on site.
Oh no, the odds they had it. You know, like guys like Phil Jarrett, and they used to run books. You know, the odds. You know, they'd run a book, and I think Nat won a fair bit of money on me.
Yeah.
He picked me. I had odds of 10 to 1. And wow. I think he put $10 on me and won $100 and broke the book, broke the bank.
You should have put your $5 on yourself.
Oh, I know, mate. I know I should have. Would have made $50. Yeah, good call.
Yeah. Great days. It's amazing to think there's no bells this year, though.
It's weird, but you know, it'll make everyone appreciate Bells 2021. You know, Bells will be back. Firing up, and you know, I think in Victoria they got this thing going where you can only, you know, surf your local break. So you know, Bells and Winky Pot might be uncrowded. Who knows? I mean, might be just the crew that live in Torquay or Jan Juck even. You know, I don't know, but I'm sure it's pumping down there.
So you know, that leads into you know, the first world titles in San Diego, which you might talk about next time. Your first world titles in '72. And first trip to Hawaii, there's a whole other there.
That's its own. That's its own title. That's its own chapter. Yeah, going to the world titles in San Diego was the most amazing experience. I mean, just a quick snippet. It was like going to America. It was going to America as America came down after the Summer of Love, and just the scene there was just outrageous. You know.
Yeah.
And then of course, MP and me taking off and going to Hawaii and sneaking out off from the Australian team, going to Hawaii, meeting this guy, Greg Strickland, a good friend of ours who had, you know, told us all about Hawaii. And, you know, it was just, that's just such an adventure right there. So, yeah, next time we'll definitely do that, Tim.
Well, yeah, that's an episode all of its own.
Yeah.
hopefully you might have some special guests next time. Just
yeah, that'll be cool. I mean, we're seeing Renda, Kelly Slater and Trevor Hendy, and we're just seeing how, if they've got a bit of time, that'll be fun to talk to them. They're amazing guys. They've always got big adventures. You can imagine the journey they've been on collectively and individually, and it'd be fun to have them on board for sure.
Maybe a self-isolating survival guide or something like that.
Yeah, well, they'd be able to have some good tips for sure.
Yeah. Unreal, Bugs. Well,
Unreal,
great to talk to you again, mate. I'm looking forward to 72 stories. And one thing we could perhaps leave people with is one element of that story I love is your old headmaster, Bill Callanan, raising money for you to get to San Diego. I think you had a free dress day or something, and you even wrote a poem in your honour. Is that right?
Well, that's right. I mean, what it was that, first of all, Bill Callanan was the first principal in Australia to back surfing.
Wow.
I was abusing the system and, taking a lot of days off school, and finally he got me into his office. I thought I was going to get the cane, and he said, Rabbit, what do you want to do in life? And I told him, I said, I want to be the world champion surfer. I want to be a professional surfer. And I'm waiting for him, that look of scorn that every adult had given me. And he looked at me and went, I'll back you. He said,
wow.
I'll back you. He said, you, the deal is you come to school, you finish your higher school certificate, you can have days off to go surfing, and then we'll raise money for you to go to San Diego and represent Australia. And he backed me, and that was a big deal, for an adult. I've always been very close to the Callanan family, and he went out on a limb and he backed surfing. Miami High School was the first school in Australia to have surfing as a sport, and this back when no school would touch surfing. And then he had a come as you like day where everyone had to pay 20 cents and they could come in there, whatever clothes they wanted to wear. A school of 1,500 or 2,000 students.
Wow!
And I got all the money. It was so cool, and it was really cool. They raised money for me to go to San Diego as the first representative of Miami High School to represent Australia in the sport of surfing. Amazing. Yeah. And here we are going to the Olympics now. Really cool, mate.
Yeah. Well, there might be a lesson for us all there as we're all trying to homeschool our kids in isolation, that amongst the schoolwork you got to make room for their passions. And
well, it's a balance, I mean, it's I mean, in some respects there's never been a dumb world champion. I mean, school's important. Having an education is important, especially if you're going to take on a sport that's truly global like surfing. You need to have all your faculties working. And education is it's key. It's important. So homeschool and surf.
Unreal, mate. All right,
Unreal, man. Take it easy, everyone. Self-isolate.
Yep.
Get out in the water when you can, and then just go home and chill out. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the Rabbit Tales. And future installments, check it out on my Instagram @Rabbit Bartholomew. See you soon. Surf it up.
Rabbit tails, come and hear a yarn.